The dust cloud appeared on the horizon, like a prayer answered by the devil himself. Sarah wiped her hands on her apron, watching the lone rider approach their isolated ranch with the kind of deliberate slowness that spoke of a man who feared nothing and no one. Her husband Thomas was inside, already 3 whiskeys deep into his evening ritual of drowning whatever demons chased him from the war. The stranger dismounted with fluid grace, his leather chaps creaking like old church pews. Everything about him whispered danger, from the way his hat cast shadows across angular features to how his spurs sang a metallic lullaby with each step. His eyes, dark as midnight coffee, found hers across the dusty yard and held them captive. "Ma'am." He tipped his hat, voice rough as sandpaper on silk. "Name's Jake Morrison. Horse threw a shoe about 5 miles back. Wondering if you folks might spare some hospitality for the night." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Something about this man made her feel like a mare sensing a stallion's presence. Every nerve ending suddenly alive, every instinct screaming both danger and desire. I suppose we could manage something in the barn." "Much obliged." His smile was crooked, knowing, as if he could read the thoughts she dared not acknowledge even to herself. Thomas stumbled onto the porch, bottle in hand, squinting at their visitor through alcohol-glazed eyes. "What's this about?" "Just a traveler needing shelter, Thomas," Sarah said quickly, surprised by how steady her voice sounded when her heart was galloping like wild mustangs. The 2 men sized each other up. Thomas, soft from years of drinking and self-pity, and Jake, all lean muscle and coiled energy. It was like watching a house cat face a mountain lion. "Barn's fine," Thomas grunted, already losing interest. "Sarah, get him some supper." As darkness painted the sky purple, Sarah found herself stealing glances at Jake through the kitchen window. He moved around his horse with practiced efficiency, those strong hands gentle as he tended the animal. When he caught her watching, he winked, and heat bloomed in her cheeks like desert roses after rain. Dinner was a tense affair. Jake sat across from her at their rough wooden table, his presence filling the small room like smoke from a campfire. Every time he reached for something, she caught glimpses of the powerful forearms beneath his rolled sleeves, the way his shirt stretched across broad shoulders. "Fine cooking, ma'am," he said, his voice carrying undertones that made her think of honey dripping from a spoon. Thomas barely looked up from his plate, already planning his retreat to the bottle. Sarah felt invisible to her husband. Had felt that way for months now, but under Jake's gaze, she felt seen, desired, alive. "Tell me, Morrison," Thomas slurred, "what brings you through these parts?" "Just drifting," Jake replied, but his eyes never left Sarah's face. "Sometimes a man needs to follow where the wind takes him, see what treasures he might find in unexpected places." The word treasures hung in the air like incense, heavy with meaning. Sarah's pulse quickened as she realized he wasn't talking about gold or silver. Later, as she cleared the dishes, Jake's fingers brushed hers when he handed her his plate. The contact was electric, sending shivers up her arm like lightning seeking ground. For a moment, neither moved, the simple touch speaking volumes about the storm brewing between them. "Thank you kindly for the meal," he murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I have a feeling this night holds more promise than most." Thomas was already snoring in his chair, empty bottle at his feet. Sarah looked at her unconscious husband, then at Jake, and felt something wild and desperate unfurling in her chest like a flower blooming in fast motion. The stranger had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. The grandfather clock in the parlor chimed midnight, its deep bronze voice echoing through the silent house like a countdown to sin. Sarah lay beside her snoring husband, every fiber of her being attuned to the sounds from the barn, the soft nickering of horses, the creak of leather, and underneath it all, the knowledge that Jake Morrison was out there, probably thinking about her the same way she couldn't stop thinking about him. Thomas's breathing was heavy with whiskey and exhaustion, the kind of deep sleep that wouldn't break for cannon fire, much less a restless wife slipping from their marriage bed. Sarah's bare feet found the cool wooden floor, her white nightgown ghost-like in the moonlight streaming through lace curtains. She told herself she was just checking on their guest, being a proper hostess. But her heart knew the truth. She was a moth drawn to a flame that would surely burn her alive. The barn door stood slightly ajar, golden lamplight spilling out like liquid honey. She could see Jake's silhouette moving inside, and something about his solitary presence made her feel bold, reckless. Her hand trembled as she pushed the door wider. He was brushing down his stallion, shirtless in the warm night, muscles rippling beneath skin bronzed by countless days under the merciless sun. When he heard her enter, he turned slowly, as if he'd been expecting her all along. Couldn't sleep either. His voice was whiskey smooth, knowing, "I wanted to make sure you had everything you needed." The words sounded foolish even to her own ears. Jake set down the brush, his movements deliberate as a predator stalking prey. "What I need," he said, stepping closer, "and what I can have are two very different things, aren't they, Sarah?" The way he said her name made her knees weak. No one had spoken to her like that in years, like she was a woman worth wanting, worth risking everything for. "This is madness," she whispered. But she didn't step away when he moved closer still, close enough that she could smell leather and sage and something uniquely masculine that made her head spin. Sometimes madness is the only thing that makes sense. His fingers traced the air near her cheek, not quite touching but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "Tell me you haven't thought about it. Tell me you haven't wondered what it would feel like to be truly alive again." She had. God help her, she had. In the long, lonely nights when Thomas passed out drunk, she'd imagined strong hands and passionate kisses, imagined being desired with the kind of fierce hunger she saw burning in Jake's dark eyes. "My husband is a fool who doesn't know the treasure he has." Jake's voice was rough with barely controlled desire. "When was the last time he looked at you like you were the most beautiful thing in creation? When was the last time he made you feel like a woman instead of just a convenience?" The questions hit like physical blows because she couldn't remember. Couldn't remember the last time Thomas had really seen her, really wanted her. "You're playing with fire," she breathed. "Then let me burn." His hand finally made contact, cupping her face with surprising gentleness. "Let us both burn." For a moment she leaned into his touch, starved for affection, for passion, for the feeling of being desired. Then reality crashed back like cold water. "I can't. I won't." She stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself like armor. "I'm a married woman. You're a woman dying of thirst in the desert, and I'm offering you water." Jake's eyes held hers, intense and unwavering. "But I won't force what isn't freely given. When you're ready to stop pretending that what's between us doesn't exist, you know where to find me." Sarah fled then, running back to the house like the devil himself was chasing her. But as she slipped back into bed beside her unconscious husband, she knew the real devil was the desire burning in her veins. The knowledge that Jake Morrison had awakened something in her that had been sleeping far too long. Outside, a coyote howled at the moon, and Sarah wondered if it was crying for the same impossible things she wanted. 3 days passed, like years. Jake found reasons to linger, helping with repairs, tending to sick cattle, making himself indispensable while Thomas grew increasingly dependent on his bottle. Sarah watched this dangerous dance from the kitchen window, her body betraying her with every stolen glance, every accidental touch when Jake came in for meals. The tension between them was a living thing, crackling like electricity before a thunderstorm. When Jake's fingers brushed hers passing the coffee pot, when their eyes met across the dinner table, when she caught him watching her hang laundry with an intensity that made her feel naked despite being fully clothed. Each moment wound the spring tighter. Thomas, oblivious in his alcoholic haze, had taken to passing out earlier each evening. Tonight was no different. By 9 o'clock he was snoring in his chair, empty bottle rolling from slack fingers. Sarah stood at the kitchen sink, washing dishes with unnecessary vigor, trying to scrub away the thoughts that plagued her. Through the window, she could see Jake in the corral, working with a wild Mustang he'd offered to break. The horse was magnificent, all power and rebellion, and watching Jake gentle the beast with patient hands and soft words made something deep inside her ache with longing. A soft knock at the back door made her heart leap. She dried her hands slowly, knowing who it would be, knowing this moment had been inevitable since the first time their eyes met. Jake stood in the doorway, hat in hand, his dark hair tousled by the evening breeze. Sarah. Just her name, but spoken like a prayer, like a promise, like a question all rolled into one. You shouldn't be here. But she stepped aside to let him in, her body making decisions her mind couldn't quite accept. I know. He moved into the kitchen, filling the small space with his presence. But I can't stay away anymore. Can't pretend I don't see the way you look at me, the way you tremble when I'm near. Jake, please. Please what? He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. Please leave you alone to waste away in a marriage that's already dead. Please pretend we don't feel this fire between us. His words were harsh truths that cut deep. Her marriage to Thomas had been dying a slow death for years, killed by his drinking and her growing loneliness. What are you asking of me? She whispered. Everything. His hand rose to cup her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with reverent gentleness. I'm asking you to choose life over mere existence. I'm asking you to come away with me, to let me show you what it means to be cherished, desired, loved the way you deserve. The offer hung between them like forbidden fruit, beautiful and tempting and dangerous beyond measure. I can't just abandon everything. What everything? Jake's voice was passionate, urgent. A husband who drinks himself unconscious every night? A life where you're invisible, unappreciated, unloved. That's not living, Sarah. That's just surviving. Tears spilled down her cheeks because he was right. Because she'd been dying by inches for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to truly live. Come with me, he whispered, his forehead touching hers. Tonight, we'll ride until we find somewhere we can be free, somewhere we can love each other without shame or fear. For a moment, she let herself imagine it, riding through the night with Jake, feeling the wind in her hair and his strong arms around her, starting fresh somewhere no one knew their story. And if Thomas wakes up, if he comes looking, he won't. Jake's voice was certain. And even if he did, what could he do? You're not his property, Sarah. You're a woman with the right to choose her own happiness. The grandfather clock chimed 10 times, each note echoing like a heartbeat. In the parlor, Thomas snored on, lost to the world. One night, Sarah heard herself say, the words coming from some deep, desperate part of her soul, give me one night to think, to decide. Jake's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. One night, he agreed. But Sarah! His thumb traced her lower lip, the touch sending fire through her veins. When morning comes, I'm leaving. With or without you. I can't stay here watching you fade away, knowing what we could have together. He kissed her forehead then, soft and sweet and full of promise, before disappearing back into the night like a beautiful dream. Sarah stood alone in her kitchen, hand pressed to where his lips had touched, knowing that come morning, she would have to choose between safety and passion, between the life she knew and the love she'd always dreamed of. The night stretched endlessly before Sarah like an ocean of possibility and terror. She paced her bedroom floor while Thomas snored beside her, his whiskey-soaked sleep deep as a grave. Every creak of the house, every whisper of wind through the curtains seemed to call her name, seemed to urge her toward the choice that would change everything. At 2 a.m, she gave up pretending she could sleep. Wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, she slipped outside into the cool desert air. The barn glowed softly with lamplight, and she could see Jake's silhouette moving inside, probably as restless as she was. Her bare feet found the path to the barn as if drawn by invisible threads. This time she didn't hesitate at the door. Jake was sitting on a hay bale, his shirt open, revealing the powerful chest she'd tried so hard not to imagine. When he saw her, he stood slowly, his eyes drinking her in like a man dying of thirst. Sarah. Her name was a caress on his lips. I can't stop thinking about what you said. Her voice was barely a whisper, about choosing life over existence. And what have you decided? Instead of answering with words, she let her shawl slip from her shoulders, the soft fabric pooling at her feet like shed inhibitions. Jake's breath caught, his eyes darkening with desire so intense it made her feel powerful, beautiful, alive. Are you sure? His voice was rough with barely controlled hunger. Once we cross this line, there's no going back. I've been dead for so long, she whispered, stepping closer. Show me what it means to live. Jake closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands framing her face like she was something precious and fragile. When his lips finally met hers, it was like lightning striking the earth. Electric, inevitable, transformative. The kiss deepened, years of loneliness and longing pouring out between them. His hands tangled in her hair, and she pressed against him, feeling the solid strength of his body, the rapid beat of his heart that matched her own. My beautiful Sarah, he murmured against her throat, his lips trailing fire along her skin. I've wanted you since the moment I saw you. She gasped as he lifted her easily, carrying her to the soft hay in the corner where he'd made his bed. The sweet smell of dried grass surrounded them as he laid her down gently, his eyes worshipping every inch of her face. Tell me you want this, he whispered, his hand tracing the curve of her waist through the thin fabric of her nightgown. Tell me you choose this. Choose us. I choose you, she breathed, and meant it with every fiber of her being. I choose life. I choose love. What followed was a symphony of whispered endearments and gentle touches, of 2 souls finding each other in the darkness. Jake worshipped her body like a temple, showing her pleasures she'd never imagined, making her feel like a goddess instead of a forgotten wife. When the storm finally broke between them, when they found their rhythm like dancers who'd been practicing this dance their whole lives, Sarah understood what it meant to be truly alive. Every nerve ending sang, every breath was a celebration, every heartbeat a declaration of freedom. Afterward, they lay entwined in the sweet-smelling hay, her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. The first pale fingers of dawn were creeping through the barn windows, painting everything in shades of gold and possibility. Come with me, Jake whispered into her hair. We'll ride to California, start fresh where no one knows our story. I'll love you the way you deserve to be loved, every day for the rest of our lives. Sarah lifted her head to look at him, this beautiful, dangerous man who had awakened her from a living death. In his eyes, she saw their future, wild and free and full of passion. Yes, she whispered, sealing their fate with a kiss. Yes to everything, as the sun rose over the desert, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Sarah Morrison, for she was already his in every way that mattered, prepared to ride toward a new life, leaving behind the shadows of her past for the blazing promise of love. The cowboy had waited for her husband to sleep, had pulled her from her cage of loneliness, and she had opened herself to possibilities she'd never dared dream. Now, as they prepared to ride into the sunrise together, Sarah knew she had finally chosen to truly live.